Small Black communities emerged through the village, particularly in the downtown area. These communities flourished as they opened their own businesses and built 3 churches. You might know them: Star of Bethlehem, St. Matthew's Church, and Full Gospel Tabernacle. However, even amidst the growth, the Black community met resistance as they attempted to assimilate into the larger community of Ossining. I'm going to paint you a picture about this resistance at work and how it affected our community. During this time, the Ossining Recreation Department had separate committees that made decisions regarding community leisure programs. The Negro Recreation Committee was filled by African American members of the community that had a strong desire to provide quality leisure programs for the Black residents. They served only the Black population, resulting in segregated events. As noted in several articles, many times the Black events were more successful and well attended than that of their white counterparts. In 1931, the dances that followed the basketball games were a community favorite. They were so popular that they would reschedule the dates to give more time for the event. However, the added time was not always for the dancing. It was to accommodate the time needed to have 2 separate dances, one for the whites and one for the Blacks. In spite of this fact, the interviewed elders that I spoke to recount fond memories of childhood in Ossining. They talked passionately about their fun at the playgrounds close to their home. Here's where things get interesting. When I asked them if they took advantage of all the parks in Ossining, they told me no. And I asked why. And they said, we played at Snowden Park, Hunter Street Park, which is no longer there, and the Hollow Playground, which is no longer there. And they said it's because our parents wouldn't let us go to other parks because it was an unwritten rule that we had to stay on our side of town. One gentleman remembers defying his parents and venturing to play at Nelson Park. He was met with racial slurs to return to his side of the town. The resistance to integration was not a new plight for the Black community. However, they pressed forward, band together to fight to becoming contributing members of the village. This forced isolation gave birth to many civic organizations and groups: Ossining Negro Civic Organization, Ossining Negro Elks, Pride of Ossining, Negro Progressive League, the United Front Defensive Committee of Ossining, and the Negro Welfare League, just to name a few. Well organized, with large and consistent membership, these groups moved with a purpose. They worked in tandem with each other to effectuate change, addressing issues affecting housing, employment, education, and public safety. They not only addressed race issues on the home front, but championed causes in the South, such as the case of the Stottsboro 9 in Alabama in 1931. 9 young Black men looking for work on the train. 2 white women on the same train accused them of rape. They were all sentenced to death by electrocution. The civic and social groups here in Ossining took an active role in raising awareness of this case, sending letters to the president and raising money for their defense. This was no small feat. This was during the Great Depression, when most did not have disposable income. Over the next 30 years, the Black community would continue to grow and prosper despite the obstacles they faced, working toward the American dream of home ownership, entrepreneurship, and education for their children. Their dreams were becoming reality despite challenges. Black businesses were booming with salons and stores, restaurants, sports bars, and home ownership was again a reality. They did not come without its challenges, though, that home ownership. An elder recounted the story of her parents who sought a mortgage at the Ossining Bank, just to be told that they were not giving out mortgages at that time. After her father was met by a white friend who was also an officer of the bank, when he asked about the business he was trying to conduct and the answer he was given, he escorted his Black friend into his office and approved his loan. Allyship. The civic organizations will continue to act As a fierce advocate for the Black community, meeting frequently with village officials to address matters that affected the Black residents, including membership discrimination in the fire department and issues with the police department, including their unwillingness to hire qualified Black applicants. They created educational programs on topics ranging from politics to health issues affecting Black people. Now, after this progress, we come back to the 2 race riots that I started with in the 60s and 70s, events that seem to define our existence here in the village. These displays of racial-based violence are reactions to a time of civil unrest and the civil rights movement. It shined a light on the ugly truth that as a community, we have not fully dealt with our issues of racism, in an effort to help in the healing process for those events with the Together Weekend. A beautiful weekend filled with entertainment, bonding, and talking to better understand our differences so we can get past them. There are still many organizations around started and served by the Black community, including the CAP, the Ossining branch of the NAACP, and the People's Center for Justice, Peace and Justice. And the Peace and Justice Center opened in 1971 and was located in the building that now occupies the Ossining Open Door. Their opening ceremony brought the likes of Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who offered a soul-stirring address and a call to action to the community's youth about exercising the right to vote and taking an active part of the system that regulates us, a notion that is extremely relevant today. Now we come to the 80s and 90s, and without giving my age, I can speak to that personally. I remember being in the Girl Scouts and having a sleepover at camp, and I couldn't understand why the camp counselor was the only one hanging with me. So I asked one of the girls, and she said, "You're Black and I don't have to hang with you." As I grew older, I forged great relationships with some of my white classmates. Excuse me. But it was confined to the walls of the school building because, as they would admit, they couldn't invite me into their homes because I was Black. Despite these feelings toward the color of my skin, by some, not all, I always loved living in Ossining. I felt safe and I walked around without fear. It was in this decade that Christopher Malone was shot and killed by Ossining police officers. It was the first time I ever felt fear at home. I, like many others, thought that Ossining was exempt from this type of tragedy. And fast forward to today. The Black population has decreased dramatically for many reasons. Displacement from urban renewal in the 70s, financial reasons today, retirement, etc. However, the community left still echoes the same sentiment of our elders. They love home, they love Ossining, and they simply want Ossining to love them back. Sadly, we're still fighting against inequality, injustice, and racism within the village. History has a habit of repeating itself, but we have a responsibility to change the narrative by working together to make our community better, equal, and equitable. It is up to us to recognize the paths forged by our elders in this community and the ways we have built our history in this community. We must honor the work of those who came before us and continue our work to bring about equality to ensure future generations a bright future. This is an important election year. Your ancestors fought for your right to vote. Exercise that right to vote. Take a seat at one of the tables